Did you know the word safe has destroyed more fortunes than almost any financial crisis? It sounds strange, right? But when the world starts to break, the things people trusted the most often collapse first. For centuries, investors have searched for one thing, a place to hide their wealth when chaos arrives. Banks promise safety. Governments promise protection. Markets promise stability. But history tells a much darker story. Again and again, the assets people believed were safe turned into traps. Not because they were foolish, but because safety on paper isn't the same as safety in reality. Let's start with the first illusion, cash. Cash feels powerful, liquid, reliable. But its value is only as strong as the system behind it. In 1923 Germany, people needed wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. During the Weimar hyperinflation, life savings became worthless in months. Families who had spent decades building security woke up to discover their money could barely buy a newspaper. The paper was still there, but the value had vanished. The second illusion is government bonds. They're often called the safest investment in the world, backed by the full power of a nation. But governments fail more often than we think. In 1998, Russia defaulted on its debt, and investors watched billions evaporate. Argentina has defaulted multiple times. A government's promise is powerful, but only until it runs out of options. Then there's the third illusion, bank deposits. We believe our savings are secure, protected by regulations and insurance. But during the 2013 crisis in Cyprus, depositors learned a brutal lesson. Banks didn't just freeze accounts. They seized a portion of customer deposits to rescue the banking system. People woke up to discover their money had been partially confiscated overnight. The bank doors were still there, but ownership had changed. What about real estate? The fourth illusion. For generations, property has been seen as the ultimate safe haven. Land never disappears, they say, but its price can. In 2008, the global housing market collapsed. Millions of homeowners suddenly found their homes were worth far less than their mortgages. A house feels permanent, but its value lives inside the fragile psychology of the market, and that psychology can shatter overnight. Next up, the fifth illusion, stock market index funds. We're told diversification guarantees safety. Spread your risk and the system protects you. But during the Great Depression, the U.S. stock market lost nearly 90% of its value. Even diversified investors were crushed. When systemic panic begins, diversification doesn't eliminate risk. It just spreads the damage. The sixth illusion is pensions. For millions, pensions represent decades of promised security. But in Detroit's 2013 bankruptcy, pension payments were cut. Across the world, underfunded pension systems are struggling. A pension depends on the future ability of institutions to keep their promises. And sometimes, institutions fail. Illusion number 7. Stable currencies. For long periods, certain currencies seem invincible. But even the mighty can lose purchasing power, often slowly and silently. Since 1971, the US dollar has lost over 80% of its purchasing power. Prices rise, savings shrink, and the erosion happens so gradually that we barely notice until decades later. The final, and perhaps most dangerous illusion, is financial guarantees. Insurance, government protection, market safeguards. These create the comforting belief that someone else will absorb the risk. But in a systemic crisis, the safety nets themselves become fragile. In 2008, major financial institutions stood on the edge of collapse. Only massive emergency bailouts prevented a global meltdown. If those interventions had failed, many of the guarantees we rely on would have vanished. History leaves us with an uncomfortable truth. Most safe assets are only safe under normal conditions. And normal conditions don't last forever. Every financial system eventually faces stress war, debt, inflation, panic. When those forces collide, paper safety often evaporates. True safety isn't defined by what an asset promises. It's defined by how it behaves when the system itself begins to break. And as history shows, when the world changes suddenly, the safest things on paper can become the most dangerous places to hide. Thanks for watching. If this made you think, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges the way you see the world. See you next time.